Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather on the 30th day of September here, 2019. Last day of the month, October 1st tomorrow, and it just seems like fall started. Moving on to first graphic here. This is the wind forecast for 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning here, and although it's not really, well, it isn't numbered at all, I mean, with any values on there. The red area here are areas of storm force winds as a deepening low pressure area moves into the Gulf of Alaska later tonight and into tomorrow. Looking for storm force winds east side of Kodiak Island, possibly Barrens there, and maybe even here south of, from Sitkinak, Akiak areas, because probably will see some gusty northwest winds or fairly strong winds. And Kodiak Island itself is state airport. Probably you'll see gusts above 60 miles an hour blowing out of the some of the bays here on the east side of the island. And satellite imagery today showing right down in here is about where that system is developing. Right now it's just drawn as a trough in the upper air. It's a trough or low, and already a low up here in the Gulf of Alaska associated with this weakening frontal boundary here that slowly pushing eastward. Actually, several bands of moisture. I have one right through here, another one right through here that brought about 1.25 inches of rain to Yakutat during the day today. And then another one right here that's really weak, and most of the rainfall's down off the coast there. Not much at Cordova today. And then this area here, now that looks like rain, southeast flow, circulation, Kodiak. They didn't report any today, at least during the afternoon hours there at Kodiak State Airport. There were a few showers here along the Alaska Peninsula, and that was about it. Pretty light, though. And up here to the northwest, we have low pressure tracking eastward there along the Arctic coast and over the western North Slope areas. And that brought some gusty winds to areas, but precipitation generally less than 1/10 of an inch, except there were a couple of reports around 1/3 of an inch in the mountainous terrain here, the Western Brooks Range along mountain areas, but really not that big of either a wind or rain producer, but there were winds gusting 30 to 35 miles an hour along the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, not too bad here over the, well, from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, down across the eastern and central Bering Sea, and really kind of this disorganized clouds, which actually organized into a frontal boundary there, but you can see there's a lot of, it's not very solid, a lot of holes in the cloud band, and rain just to the west of Shimei. It may have started by now, but really it's pretty light, and this whole system will be moving eastward, being driven by westerly winds aloft. Coming out of the Russian Far East, they'll be coming right across the Bering Sea over the next couple of days and pushing systems quite rapidly eastward with it. On the chart today, there's that front back here to the west. A lot of clouds with it, but not all that much precipitation. Really hasn't tapped into any big source of moisture. And then we've got a couple of weak this trough here, pretty weak in the southern portion, just scattered showers, mostly cloudy skies, western part of the state here from Bristol Bay on northward, and then a little bit more widespread light precipitation up here in the area from the Western Brooks Range on out to the western Arctic coast. A break right through here with looks like some isolated areas of clearing occurring into the central interior, and then scattered showers today, but light rainfall amounts here over the eastern interior. And then we have this, as I mentioned, weakening frontal boundary pushing rain into the northern panhandle. Now this one tapped enough tropical moisture that we had the heavy rains yesterday across south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and that continued into today to about Yakutat, but not quite as heavy as it had been, and increasing rainfall occurring here over the northern panhandle, increasing clouds down to the south. Still a little bit of sunshine, around. Farther to the north, Wrangell reached 61 degrees this afternoon. That's a warm spot in the state, and may see the end of the 60s coming up here over the next couple of days. Otherwise, gusty northwest winds to 35 miles an hour with showers occurring along the Alaska Peninsula. Showers really scattering out as you get toward the Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky area here. And also winds diminish, and looks like sunshine increases there. And not too bad, AKwx and AKwx today, and the Pribilofs look like you're getting some clearing this afternoon. Dry conditions, and the next front out to the west for tonight pushes eastward here, the low pressure area way up in the Russian Far East, and that will drag across the western Aleutian areas. West to Kiska Island will be the precipitation area, and that area will be light, occasionally light, drizzle, rain, fog, IFR conditions associated with this, also with the warm front here beginning to push in toward the Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island, and winds will begin to become more southerly here for St. Lawrence Island as the ridge axis shifts inland. Look for decreasing clouds and ending shower conditions here over the western part of the state. Still pretty gusty, breezy across the Alaska Peninsula with a chance of showers. You can see this low center deepens considerably as it gets some upper support into it, and that also tightens the gradient up, and where the lines are closest together in these charts, that's where the winds blow the strongest, and it'll be by tomorrow morning or late tonight toward morning, definitely a significant increase in the winds across Kodiak Island, back into anywhere northeast Bristol Bay, Kamishak Bay, and those areas. It'll stay wet, occasional rain here along the North Gulf Coast, and also for the Panhandle as the front edges eastward tonight. It'll stay about where it was today as far as rainfall goes, except that probably won't pick up another 1.33 inches, but then they could, and it'll stay dry down to the south. Isolated showers, really isolated now with a little less in the way of cloudiness here over the eastern interior, especially north of the White Mountains of the Brooks Range. And then this system lifting off the coast and weakening, and maybe cool enough for mixed precipitation here depending on your elevation and time of day here for the Arctic coast and North Slope. Outlook for tomorrow, low pressure, again holding kind of stationary here in the western Gulf of Alaska, and the flow around that's going to back some moisture in toward Kodiak, so the east side of the island has a chance of some precipitation to go along with the strong gusty winds and the storm force winds in the forecast for tomorrow or late tonight and tomorrow. But dry back here farther to the west, clearing out in that drier slot coming down on the west side of the system. Back into the clouds, light rain, fog, and drizzle with this weak warm front. Really kind of a narrow band. It may or may not actually reach the coastline, Yukon Delta coast tomorrow afternoon. Up to the north, still a weak trough associated with that system that's now exited the area, and maybe some areas of light rain or snow showers there for the eastern North Slope to the eastern Arctic coast, maybe the Brooks Range. And otherwise, this front probably will make for a damp day for the Pribilof Islands. West winds 10 to 20 miles an hour, and it drags back. It's still hanging up across the western Aleutians. Another trough here, and actually this front will wash out and break up, kind of have it drawn for tomorrow, for Wednesday, as a couple of areas of precipitation as that westerly flow gets a little more organized coming across the Bering Sea. So areas of light rain here across the western interior, pushing eastward slowly throughout the day, may possibly make it into the Kuskokwim Valley or get hung up along the Kuskokwim Mountains. And there'll be a little bit of a break between the two systems, and then more shower conditions here for the Pribilofs as that next one begins to roll in. This system here, mostly staying to the south, but you can see it spreads a moisture shield fairly close to Unmak Island. Otherwise, look for partly sunny skies for Dutch Harbor and Alaska over to Falls Pass, maybe Cold Bay. Same thing for the AKwx area ahead of this weak warm front here, but that's mostly moving eastward. And then upper trough keeps it cloudy and wet here with lowering snowfall levels, higher elevations here of the Alaska Range northward. That'll be probably in the form of snow, and the rain down at the lower elevations. Periods of rain here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, but nothing heavy. And this system tracking eastward slowly, that's going to keep it windy and wet, especially along the south coast of the Panhandle, Prince of Wales Island. It looks good for rain across all of the southeast coast. Looking at the forecast lows for tonight, down that way, upper 40s to lower 50s. lower to mid 40s here, southern Alaska, down into the lower to mid 30s into the Tanana Valley, and upper 20s, mid to upper 20s there, upper Yukon, Koyukuk, Brooks Range area, and 30s for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, upper 30s, lower 40s, Bristol Bay, mid 40s, Kodiak Island, and the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, or I'm sorry, Tuesday, yeah, highs for tomorrow, mid 30s there up over the eastern Arctic coast, near 40 in the Tanana Valley, around 50 southern Alaska, 50s for the Panhandle, lows on Wednesday morning, 20 to 25 for the Brooks Range, and into the 20s here, even into the Kobuk-Koyukuk Valley areas. Upper 20s, lower 30s, central interior, in the 30s across southern Alaska, and near 40 along the coast, 40s for the Panhandle. Highs for Wednesday afternoon. Staying in the 30s, even below freezing or near freezing for the Brooks Range, and into the 50s for the southeast coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Tuesday morning, significant weather chart showing big batch of IFR here associated with frontal system moisture coming across the Bering Sea and pretty good westerly flow. That almost to the Pribilos by morning, cutting across the western Aleutians to Adak and just north of Atka. Marginal VFR in across the interior, central southern areas becomes IFR here over into the Copper River Basin, up from the Gulf of Alaska and into the 40-mile country here in Upper Tanana Valley. That's associated with a band that's pushing back to the west-northwest, and then a band IFR right down along and off the Arctic coast, IFR, Kobuk-Koyukuk valleys on out to the Arctic coast. And then for the afternoon, that retreats back, becomes VFR here from Kotzebue, Selwick, Buckland there in the, or not Buckland, but yeah, Buckland, the Kobuk Valley, and the Koyukuk and Upper Yukon here become VFR. IFR, though, holds here with that moisture lifting northward there into the, well, from the about Fairbanks all the way over to the border. Marginal VFR to the south into the Gulf, marginal for the Panhandle, IFR, or VFR, Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay, and IFR here from the Cape Lisburne area right on down across St. Lawrence Island to just west of the Pribilofs into the western Aleutians. And then for Wednesday morning, IFR here, southern Bering Sea, kind of drops back into the far western Aleutians. Otherwise, the Bering Sea marginal, Bristol Bay marginal VFR, and marginal with isolated IFR and a little bit of VFR here for southern Alaska, especially Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley looking good for the VFR. IFR again, eastern Tanana Valley, or upper Tanana Valley, and 40-mile country, marginal for the Copper River Basin. IFR, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, North Slope, on down into the Noatak Valley, and IFR mostly for the Panhandle. Afternoon forecast, that improves to marginal VFR, to possibly even VFR conditions there for Hyder and maybe Klawock. Otherwise, Yakutat looks to be VFR. Kodiak Island again, VFR up into the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, even Prince William Sound, Manuscus, the Susitna Valley. And then we got marginal VFR from the Talkeetnas across Copper River Basin, northward with some areas of IFR there all the way out to the Arctic coast. Marginal VFR here back to the west and the Bering Sea, and just a small batch of IFR out there near Adak and to the west-northwest. And for passes tomorrow, Anaktuvik starting out marginal, improving to VFR into the afternoon. Same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And then looks like it may drop back down to marginal by evening with that band of moisture pushing westward. And then for Rainy, marginal VFR becomes VFR. Windy, though, marginal VFR becomes IFR. And Isabel looks to be occasionally IFR the entire day. And Mentasta, though, you'll be far enough east, and it can start out marginal and then become VFR in the afternoon. And for Tanita, IFR becoming marginal late in the afternoon. Portage, IFR, Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet here, sneaks on down to the central Alaska range here and into the Tanana Valley tomorrow morning. Otherwise, we've got warming conditions, 10,000 feet here down over the southern panhandle, so a little bit lower at the surface there for the Berks Range, and otherwise 2,000 feet for the Seward Peninsula areas, south coast there, and then warming back up to about 8,000 feet over the central Aleutians. And for icing, kind of a weak area here with that system coming in. Could produce areas of light rime icing above 6,000 feet here. Yukon Delta coast and Nunivak Island, and then western Seward Peninsula up across the Chukchi. So you may catch Cape or Point Hope, Cape Lisburne. That's about it. Better chance icing here with some, well, I'd say light rime with areas of considerable moderate, kind of right through this zone here with that moisture pushing northwestward, and then more icing in store for the Panhandle. Jet stream, upper level ridge here weakening and moving off, upper level trough right through here, and then some ridging over the interior a little bit, and then we'll see at 9,000 feet, winds increasing along the southeast coast. 60 knot north-northwesterlies here, Kodiak Island, fall back to about 50 knots there for the Alaska Peninsula. Light winds, central northern interior, westerlies 25 to 30 across the Bering Sea, and about the same here at 3,000 feet, except lighter on the winds, but good northwest flow here across the Alaska Range and into Kodiak Island. Translates into moderate chop there, southwest Kodiak Island and the Panhandle.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's a dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the Northern Lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the Northern Lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling, you know. It's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, oh, you're elevated, levitating, you are lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Not a lot of change from yesterday or the day before, or from Saturdays for that matter, here on the sea ice conditions, and not a lot of big changes coming up for the week, although probably starts slowly increasing up through this area here. And for the coastal water forecast, we've got gales out for most of the coast through tomorrow, except the south coast, where it'll be southeast at 30 knots with 10-foot seas. Otherwise, 35-knot winds with 10 to 11-foot seas. Gale warnings also in the forecast for Clarence Strait. Southeast 35 tomorrow, 7-foot seas. Southeast 30 for Stevens Point, or Stevens Passage, and south 20 for Lynn Canal. Outlook for Wednesday, bring the winds down just 10 knots there for Lynn Canal, and southeasterlies at 15 for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait southeast coming down to 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Small craft advisories on the south coast, where winds will be south at 25 knots, 13-foot seas. Gales on the north coast, east-southeasterlies 35 knots with seas as high as 13 feet. And for Kamishak Bay, northwest 45 knots, almost a storm, but it will be a storm for the Barren Islands. Northerlies at 50 knots. Cook Inlet, kind of the standout here. North 45 knots for northern Cook Inlet with 10-foot seas, and 40-knot northerlies south of the Forelands with seas 11 feet. And for the western North Gulf Coast, northeast at 35, becoming east at 35. There's you head over into the Middleton Island area. Prince William Sound, east winds 30 knots, and seas coming up almost at 7 feet, but we'll call it 6 feet. And for the outlook for Wednesday, much light, back to the light wind conditions and slight seas down to 2 feet and 10-knot winds from the northwest. Small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf Coast at 25 knots, much lighter here on the west side. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, winds come down under storm and gale force in the afternoon, but still pretty brisk at 30 knots from the northwest. West 10 knots now for Cook Inlet. And for the Alaska Peninsula, northwesterlies 30 to 40 knots with the gales on the Pacific side of the peninsula. And then we've got, well, actually also higher gusts there out of the bays of the peninsula up to 55 knots. And then solid storm warning here from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and then up the east side of Kodiak Island, northwest 50 knots, higher gusts, northwest 40 for Shelikof Strait. Gale warnings for Bristol Bay, northwest at 35 knots. Outlook for Wednesday. West winds at 20 here for Bristol Bay into Shelikof Strait. There, jumping the Aleutian Range, northwest 30. for the east side of Kodiak, and then Sitkinak to Castle Cape, west 30 knots, and Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and the entire Alaska Peninsula, as well as Bristol Bay, all at 20 knots, as I mentioned, in Shelikof Strait, with seas running 5 to 6 feet. Western Aleutians, west of Kiska Island, southwest 20. Kiska Island eastward here, southeast or southwest to 25 knots. 20 to 25 knots southwesterlies here for the AKwx area. And Fox Islands west 25 knots, diminishing here in the afternoon, especially for Unmak Island. And then for Wednesday, on Alaska Island south, 15 to 20 knots, more variable here for Unmak Island, and variable 15 for the AKwx area, becoming west 15 to 20 for the Western Aleutians. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northwest 30 knots, Yukon Delta coast, southwest 20, pick it up to 25 there for the St. Matthew Island area, southwest 20 for the Pribilof, south 20, St. Lawrence Island. And for Wednesday, southwest 20, St. Lawrence Island, 15 to 20 knot winds here from the southwest along the coast, and west 20 for both the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island. Up on the eastern Boulevard Sea coast tomorrow, winds 25 knots here on the extreme east side, coming down to 20 there as you head west, and then northeast 15 on the central coast, turning south at 20 knots, and then from Cape Beaufort to Wales, south 25, seas 6 feet. And the outlook for Wednesday, small craft advisories continue from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, otherwise 20 knot winds either side of that, southeast 20 here, west side and central coast, east 15 on the east side. Tonight, deepening low pressure here in the Gulf of Alaska, and winds increase dramatically here for Kodiak Island, and then back up to the north here in the tighter gradient. Rain trying to push all the way across the Panhandle, stays wet for the North Gulf Coast. Next system, pretty weak coming across the Bering Sea. Maybe rain reaches the coast tomorrow afternoon, maybe the Alaska Peninsula. Windy, wet conditions with this low in the Gulf of Alaska. Finally, rain across all of the Panhandle, pushing northeastward, north of the Alaska Range a little bit, and the next day kind of unsettled.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.